Hello, everybody. Thank you for watching The Naturalist Capitalist. I'm your host, Reed Coverdale, and I've got a face you guys might know. He is the lead singer of All That Remains. He is a U.S. Marine. Phil Labonte. How's it going, Phil?
How you doing, Reed? Good. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it, man.
Oh, yeah. No, this is great. We've had a little bit of a bromance going on Twitter for the last couple months, and it's drawn the jealousy of many Twitter people. So everyone wants to, they should, yeah, absolutely. But everyone wants to know, what is it about Reed that you like, Phil? What started the bromance? What is it?
The Liberty Uniter. The Liberty Uniter. The fact that you took the time to say, wait a minute, there are a lot of people that are criticizing the Mises Caucus for a lot of things that just don't seem to add up. And I'm going to go and put myself out there and vocally say, wait a minute, we should be uniting for causes that advance the cause of liberty. And that's what it was. I was like, that guy gets it. That guy gets it. And I want to talk to that guy. I want to be friends with this guy. I want to make sure that this guy's voice is elevated in the liberty community, because there are too many people that are really, really, really quick to start. I mean, everyone knows the libertarian joke that you're not a real libertarian. You know, no one's a real libertarian because, you know, you can always poke holes into, you know, unless you're a straight up anarchist, and usually a market anarchist, but maybe even a left-leaning anarchist will say this, but you're not a real libertarian unless you're me. That's kind of the way that it ends up going. And that's unproductive. It doesn't advance the cause of liberty. It doesn't advance the idea that it doesn't help to shrink the state. It doesn't explain to people why it's bad that the state is as big as it is. And it's one of the things that have been historically incredibly frustrated with the big L Libertarian Party about is, you know, they are a political party, and they act like a political party too frequently. And I mean, if you're acting like a political party, you're probably not advancing the cause of liberty, you know? Right. So that was the thing. I was like, this dude gets it. So that's why I was like, I want to know this guy. I want to talk to this guy. I want to do what I can to help elevate his voice. The fact that, like you said, like, you know, you reached out to Dave was the thing that really got me. Dave Smith, for people that aren't aware, but like the thing that really got me was like, he's reaching out to Dave. He's not demonizing the Mises Caucus. And the Mises Caucus is what got me into libertarian ideas. It was Ron Paul, and then Tom Woods, and that was Tom exposed me to Lysander Spooner, to Lou Rockwell, to, you know, Hayek. He's the reason I know who Hayek is. He's the reason that I read Bastiat. He's the reason that I know, you know, what libertarianism is. And I know these guys aren't racist. Right. And that was something that is, by left-leaning people throw that term around so much, and it has been historically so bad. I think that it's becoming, not that racism is becoming less bad, using the term racist as a slur or to insult someone or to say you shouldn't listen to them. It's becoming less effective because everyone has used it so loosely for things that are clearly not racist.
It kind of goes both ways. Like, you know, I remember when, you know, Bernie was looking like he was going to become the nominee of the Democrat Party. And I said last year, you guys have called every single Democrat, no matter how corporate they were, a socialist. And now an actual socialist is about to be nominated, and you've completely made the term meaningless. It's just like with racism or Nazi or whatever label you want to throw at anyone. When you use it out of context so much, it eventually doesn't mean anything. But I want to point out to everyone what Phil's talking about is just one tweet I made, and everyone feels like it's so hard to make a positive impact. It's way easier to be negative, but I just made this one tweet and I tagged a bunch of people, and it wasn't just the Mises Caucus, it was kind of all sides of the liberty movement. And I was like, hey, can we get along? And people latched onto it. So positivity and unity is something that people want. It's not, I mean, because everywhere else, there's so much division. People hate each other for stupid reasons. And the libertarians are the only ones who can defeat the culture war, like Dave was talking about on our show the other day. We're the only ones who have the answers to diffuse all these problems by not trying to control everybody's lives, letting them make their own decisions, decentralizing everything. So if we want to carry this torch, we've sort of got to stop throwing food at each other so other people will look at us and say, hey, I want to be part of that.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that obviously there are fundamental principles that go along with being a libertarian, and if you don't agree on those things, then you aren't, you aren't for liberty. Like
Right.
You can't, as much as I'm kind of in agreement with you about Tulsi Gabbard, right? But her stance on the Second Amendment and her stance on some of her domestic policy probably would preclude me from ever being like a full-on Tulsi supporter. But I will say anti-war goes a long friggin' way, right? Like that, the anti-war stance that she has really makes a lot of things that are unpalatable. We're just kind of like, maybe I could hold my nose and vote for her, like, yeah, especially if it were looking like the Congress was going to be more liberty minded than it was to be more, say, establishment Democrat minded. So anti-war goes a long way, but you still have to have the basic opinions on civil rights that line up with liberty. You can't be wishy-washy on the Fourth Amendment, which means you can't be wishy-washy on civil asset forfeiture. You can't be wishy-washy on the Fifth Amendment. You can't be wishy-washy on the First Amendment. And there are libertarians that are getting kind of wishy-washy on the First Amendment. Angela in LA, I forget what her last name is, but she's out in LA and she works with the LP, and she was talking about how disappointed she was that libertarians didn't jump on the fact that lockdowns are incredibly anti-liberty. And they violate the First Amendment, they violate freedom of association. They're just, if you don't have the liberty to leave your home, then you can't consider yourself a free person. So the fact that she stood up and says, look, this is where the libertarians should be planting their flag, and I agree 100%. I'm not a guy that's going to complain about masks, right? Like, I don't care if a store says wear a mask, I'll put the mask on. I don't care. Fine. If the cops are going to come up and beat people up walking around on the street, then I have a problem with that. So I have a problem with the state mandating masks, but I don't have a problem with stores saying, look, if you're going to come in here, just wear a mask, if only because it makes my customers happy. That's good enough for me. Okay, I'll put it on. No big deal. Just so long as it's not the state doing it, I really don't mind. Because, if it makes people more comfortable, then I don't care. I know there are some people out there that are real, like, no mask ever, blah, 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 and I don't care, and da. Well, then, that's fine. You can feel that way, but, don't get mad when a store owner is like, yo, if you want to come in, just put it on, because it's really not that big of a deal, as long as it's not, the state. So I think that the Libertarian Party missed that boat all year last year. I mean, I met Joe Jorgensen real quick, and I voted for Joe, and I've talked back and forth with Spike, and I was 100% in agreement with Dave about the whole anti-racist tweet that Joe Jorgensen made. She didn't, and I also believe that she didn't understand what she was saying. I don't think she, like Dave said on your podcast that you just did with them, they jumped feet first ignorantly into a white hot culture war. And they did it on the side of the authoritarians.
Right.
How are you going to go and be the Liberty Party and say that you must be this?
Right.
You can't square that circle. You just can't. So I was real frustrated, and I fully disavowed the Big L Libertarian Party. And I've had my run-ins with my internet run-ins with Nick Sarwark. I try not to get into fights with him. I try to make it just be like, dude, what are you doing? More like, come on, stop it, than attacking him. We have had some crappy back and forths, but I try to avoid them. I genuinely put the effort in to not poke at him. I think that trying to bring people to the Libertarian Party from the left is probably not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason, and I mean, I'm open to being persuaded otherwise, but when you've got the most of the liberty-minded people that are left-leaning come at liberty from a somewhat of a Marxist perspective, because there's an argument that says that Marx was a libertarian or started the libertarian ideas, and that the idea of oppression that Marx was talking about is what started libertarianism. And I'm not 100% sure that I buy that, but I do see the argument. So I might not be swayed, but I see the argument. And I think that when you've got people like James Weeks that gets naked on the libertarian at the Libertarian Convention, and he's also a member of the DSA, which is where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez kind of hangs her hat. There's no one that's going to say AOC is liberty minded. No one at all. No one. Now you can look at Tulsi and say Tulsi's liberty minded. You can see that. You can see it in the way she presents ideas, the way that she approaches ideas, her anti-war stance, blah blah blah. AOC is not liberty minded. AOC is, and the DSA is not liberty minded. They're definitely DSA. They're definitely socialists. So I don't see how someone can be a member of the DSA and a libertarian socialist. I think that's just I think they're being dishonest, because I think that they're way more socialist than they are liberty minded.
Yeah, I think there's a very, very small percentage that we can reach over there. That's kind of what I've arrived at. I don't know if you saw my video I did with Kim Iverson yesterday, but she is of that cloth of the people who are reachable. Mm-hmm. And it's very disappointingly small. There's so few of them. I mean, because you've got kind of like the neoliberal, like centrist Democrats. Most of those people are really hard to get to because they just don't care about any of the same issues. And then you have the hard left people who care about a lot of the same issues, but they're so intent on their own solutions. And there's like no room for any idea about markets or freedom of money. I mean, they're just so ideologically bound up in Marxism, basically. And there's
it is. That's there's no there, like I'm not afraid of calling out Marxism and pointing to Marxist ideas. There's a lot of people that kind of shy away from that, and I'm not afraid to be like, look, this is how it's Marxist. This is what Marx said. These are the ideas that they share with Marx. This is why it's Marxism. And I'm totally in agreement with you. If your idea of liberty requires forcing other people to do things, it's not liberty.
Right.
It's not. I mean, I'm not an ANCOM just because I think a fair way to say it is ideologically I love ANCOMs. I love the idea of an anarchist society with property rights, private property rights. But as soon as you talk to Marxists, they're like, well, there's a difference between private property and personal property. I'm like, well, you lost me, because there's not. There's not. You're just making shit up so that way you can tell people what to do. That's literally all you're doing.
Yeah,
So
the only way I've heard it described where it makes sense at all is I had Magnus Panvidya on my show the other week, and he's that. I don't know if you saw that,
I
but
just followed him today because of the tweet that you put up where you went through the list of your kind of progression and you
oh yeah,
quoted him. So
yeah. So he got kind of famous like a month ago because he did this speech. I forget what state he was in. I think it was Michigan, but he did this speech in front of the Capitol building, and he was talking about how these movements like the Boogaloo Boys and Black Lives Matter and everything, they're a result of the authoritarian government, and what we need is to basically get rid of the federal government and decentralize everything. So I had him on because I actually asked him how can anarcho-communists and anarcho-capitalists get along, and he said the only way it works is if everything's radically decentralized and you just have like basically 10,000 small countries, so each community lives by its own rules. So you could have a communist community, like a hippie commune or something, where people just accept that everything is communally owned. And then you have this other community where everyone has their own house. So that kind of made sense to me. I mean, if you break it up like that, but yeah, I mean, if you had one big country where you're trying to mix those two ideas, they just don't really convene.
or if you're a Marxist that believes that it's going to be global communism, because
Right.
that's what Marxists, that's what Marx thought. Marx thought that, eventually the proletariat worldwide was going to rise up and all of countries were going to be abolished. That's why you get ancoms. That's why you get
Right.
anarcho-capitalists, is because they believe that there should be no countries, that no states are legitimate, because the existence of a state requires force, they say. So you have to get rid of all states. And that's part of the reason why I understand the justification in the 80s. And I know this is going to be something that may be controversial with libertarians, but I understand not the justification. I understand the argument in the 80s or during the Cold War about the domino theory, how if the US didn't fight communism, communism was going to take over the world. If
Mm-hmm.
you read Marx, that's what Marx said.
Mm-hmm.
Marx said that eventually communism is going to take over the world. Capitalism will fall away and it will be an uprising of the proletariat. Then Lenin came in and said that, no, you're not going to get an uprising of the people. You need to have a bourgeois party to lead the plebs through the through the revolution into socialism, and then eventually we'll get communism. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're a Marxist, if you're a Marxist Leninist, or if you're, and that's what Mao did too. I mean, if you're a Marxist or a Marxist Leninist, you're a revolutionary communist, that doesn't match with live and let live. It's
Right.
not, it's the antithesis of libertarians who want to live their own lives free of coercion. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're a Marxist, you can't be a libertarian. And I mean, I know that this is a little more on the deep side than most people want to go into Marxism and stuff. But I've read some Marx and I've listened to people that understand it, because I want to understand why you've got like what they were calling anarcho-communist communes up in the Pacific Northwest, and they were attacking the government, and they said that they were anarchists. But the anarchists that I relate to and understand are people like Eric July,
Right.
ANCOMs, like that kind of idea, where you're cool with your neighbor, as opposed to the people that are not cool with their neighbor because their neighbor wants to do something different. Like
Right.
ANCOMs are very tribal. They're very coercive in that if you step out of line, and you see that in the way that like woke people are today, if you want to call it woke. I'm not a fan of that term, but I think that it's probably going to be the one that makes the most sense and is the easiest for people to understand. The people that are woke, like they're forcing their opinion on everyone around them.
Mm-hmm.
And so and that's coming from the left now. So that kind of idea I'm strongly against, because it doesn't make room for people to have different opinions. It doesn't make room for people to be individuals. And anarchy at the very core of it is individualist. The way I understand it, it's you get to live your life however you want, free of government coercion and free of coercion from other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when it comes to people like that, it's tough. Like I do try to talk with them and show them where we do overlap. You know, I talked about it a little in the video I did with Dave. Like working on Tulsi Gabbard's campaign was painful when it was
I heard.
gun control or healthcare or the minimum wage, and I never wavered on my position. You know, I argued with her a lot about it. And I actually was like converting some of her supporters to the idea that, you know, free college was stupid or whatever. So I would always stand my ground on what I believed, but I would say, look, we've got all this overlap. Let's work together here. It's, Peter Schiff really inspired me when he went to Occupy Wall Street and did that video where he's like,
Yes.
you know, I completely understand why you are all upset and angry. Let's talk about what the real problem is.
And it was ballsy too, going down there with a sign that says, "I am the 1%. Let's talk."
Yeah.
I kind of clown Peter a little bit because of his takes on Bitcoin now, but man, that guy's got big balls. I give it to him, man. He gets a thumbs up, even though I'll poke him for hating on Bitcoin. So
yeah. So I mean, I did that last summer. I went to a Black Lives Matter rally in Denver, and I had a sign. It wasn't as ballsy as what Peter said, but my sign said, "End qualified immunity, end civil asset forfeiture, and I think demilitarize the police, vote libertarian." So I went around, like, talked with, I don't know, 100 people, and all of them were voting for Biden. I was just like,
yeah,
what is wrong with you? Like, you need to look at, and I think this was before Kamala Harris had been chosen, but especially after he chose Kamala Harris, you know, I had all these ACAB people voting for Biden and Harris. And it's like, you're voting for the guy who wrote the legislation that Harris took advantage of to fuck over so many people and cause the problems that you're out here protesting against.
Voting for the 47-year politician and the cop. Nice job. Nice job, ACAB anarchists.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't get it. And, you know, the left has been a vehicle for like corporate government agencies to just take over, you know, because they hijack their passion with a cause that's antithetical to what they want, but they use the right language, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just insane. There's just like so little critical thought over there. And it happens on the right too, you know, the right will let someone like Trump expand the size of government and spend so much money as long as he has the right rhetoric, as long as he, you know, as long as he says in January of 2020 during his State of the Union address that America will never be a socialist nation, and then he signs the CARES Act into law, and, you know, as long as he says that, you know, they'll be fine and they won't resist anything he does.
I think there's so much of it that's funny, and people on Twitter, they take me a little too seriously, I think, because a lot of times I'm laughing about the stuff that I like. I'll post a tweet, and just because I don't put haha in it doesn't mean I'm not like grinning like a moron when I'm tweeting it, like, you know. And so like, it's funny to you know, poke at Trump. I think the left deserves it a little more nowadays, but man, it's still fun to poke at Trump and you know, pointing out that Trump was not like, I like pointing out that Trump was not a good 2A president, that like, because that one gets people wound up real good, you know. And so I mean, since I've been in Texas, I'll talk about like the whole licensing thing here in Texas, and people assume because it's Texas that Texas has the most lax gun laws in the country and blah, blah. And I'm just like, man, this is an authoritarian state. And people are like, you went to Texas? What are you talking about? It's not. I'm like, when I was in New Hampshire, I didn't have to ask anyone for anything. I just went and bought a gun and then put it under my shirt, you know, like that kind of stuff. And people are like, well, you know, I'm like, yeah, I know.
I want to talk about that because we're both from New Hampshire. We were just talking a few days ago. I did a whole poll setting job right on Route 63 where you used to live. But you moved to Texas, and you said to me it was because of the anti-domestic terror bill or whatever. So you want to just explain why you chose Texas, why you had to leave New Hampshire?
I'm a full-on doomer. I don't see things getting better. I don't see off ramps. I think that once the summertime comes, all the shit that was happening in the cities and stuff last year, that shit's gonna happen again, and it's gonna be worse because they ain't gonna have Trump to blame it on.
Right.
So I moved to Texas because, like, so I'm a big advocate of an Article V convention, and I think that balkanization is probably the best way for the U.S. to avoid war, civil war. Whether that be very short term, as in the next year or two, or in the next 5-10 years. I think that that's probably the best way to avoid civil war. And because of the US's position in the world as kind of the global hegemon, if the US gets into a civil conflict, China and Russia are going to notice, and they're going to make moves themselves. I think that that kind of stuff can very easily lead to a world war. World War I was, popped off because a dude shot another dude.
Right.
The whole thing went down to an assassination in Europe, and it engulfed the whole world. World War II started because, Nazi Germany was doing dumb shit. They invaded their, so it's more of a country starting it. But at the same time, in my opinion, not like World War II was just World War I Part Two. World War I kind of had a lull for 20 years or whatever. As far as in my estimation, because without World War I, I don't think you get World War II. Without Woodrow Wilson, you probably don't get World War II either. He's the worst.
Not Trump or Obama, as that poll said. It's Wilson.
No, that people are just so wrapped up in recent presidents, and I understand. It's like, well, this is the one that I kind of know the most about because I actually lived through his thing, but still. So I'm worried about what happens, to the U.S. and more broadly to the world. If there were something to happen, if something like an Article V were to happen and the US were to break up, there would probably still be a United States or a portion of the country that would call itself the United States. And I don't think Texas would be in it. I think Texas would probably be its own country. Texas has like a 10-month growing season. They've got their own infrastructure. They've got oil. They've got refineries. They've got ports. So I'm just like, look, Texas makes sense. And also because I've got friends down here, like the guys from Black Rifle Coffee Company, Matt and JT. Those guys are buddies, and my buddy JT, actually, he's the one that hooked me up with this place. He's like, yo, check this place out. They just opened up. They got a bunch of apartments. And I was like, I looked at it and it was super, super easy, super cheap. And I'm like, do it. Cause I don't have a wife or kids. So and I stream, and, I'm in a band for a living. So I'm not tied to a place the way that people that have like normal jobs are. So Texas was easy and most likely to, along with Florida, the most likely state to interdict between the citizens of Texas and the federal government should things get weird.
Yeah. So you actually, after Trump got censored on social media, I think you wrote a letter to Sununu asking him to move forward with Article V, and
at least support it, to send to put the legislature, put it in the legislature's ear and support an Article V. And I'm not looking for the U.S. to dissolve per se. If there was a convention and somehow could manage to put the bite back in the 10th Amendment, could cut the balls off the Commerce Clause or the necessary and proper clauses. I think that might be something that could do a lot of the work that needs to be done. But right now, the way that the federal government abuses the necessary and proper clause and the Commerce Clause, it's why we have such a big federal government. I think that an Article V convention could write an amendment that would really clarify that the president doesn't have the powers that the president has assumed unconstitutionally, in my estimation. So it's really just about a peaceful way to take power from the federal government. And that's what I'm looking for. If necessary, I think that there should be a peaceful dissolution of the United States as opposed to a civil war. I think that if we don't find an off ramp, then there will be some kind of civil war or a real stomping of civil rights in the US. It's one or the other. You know, we're going to end up an Americanized version of authoritarian China. You know, where the government decides what you can and can't do, because we already have to ask the government permission for everything.
Right.
You know, on some level, people talk about, again, and I'll use guns because it's the most salient and easy to understand. But you know, if you're a free person, you don't have to ask permission to do anything.
Right.
You don't have to ask to carry a gun. You don't have to ask to start a business. You don't have to get a license to do anything if you're actually free. Licensing is permission and it's barrier to entry, you know, and some of the other
aware that these licenses are actually testing your ability. I mean, because that's the argument that people use
100%.
for them. I mean, I've got a lot of licensing, I've done a lot of training. The tests are bullshit. They're so dumb. It's all about that $60 or $150 or whatever. That's the reason the license is there. I mean, there's no reason for it other than that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think you're dead on. It becomes barrier to entry. I've heard Tom Woods make phenomenal arguments against licensing, that the market, you know, markets and insurance agents and stuff like that, or insurance companies and policies and stuff like that will do a far better job than the federal government ever would, or any government ever would, in weeding out incompetent people. You know, I mean, Ford, you know, when they do the bean counting, when they're like the scene from what's it called, from Fight Club, when he's talking about, you know, if the amount of money that the car company would have to pay out to do a recall is more than they would have to pay out should there be a bunch of people that die and sue. I mean, that's real, you know. But that doesn't mean that government regulations do anything to change that. Like, that situation is real, but just because you add government to the situation, that doesn't make that situation any less real. So the government being involved only adds an additional layer of bureaucracy and licensing and garbage that has to be dealt with. So,
yeah,
you know, I think you're dead on with that.
Yeah, so I got a question for you. With the heavy metal music you do you find that most fans of your type of music, which is by definition kind of rebellious, that most of the people who like it are strangely statists? That's something that's always been weird to me. Is that true, or is that not true?
I think it's true. I don't think that underground is what underground was 20 or 30 years ago. Underground used to mean you had to go out and find stuff, right? Like, you had to go look for it. Now underground kind of doesn't exist because it's all on the internet anyways.
Right.
So there's nothing that's underground. There are maybe niche markets, but the idea of, because when I wanted to go find an underground or a new band when I was in the underground metal scene, I had to physically go to a record store and look through the CDs, or the tapes or CDs, and I would find a cover that looked cool, and I would take a risk on buying the record, and it might suck. You know, you couldn't preview stuff very much. You could go to there were a couple places that would play the music in the place. But, you know, when I was 14 years old in 1989, I needed to get a ride from my mom 30 minutes away. And, you know, I mean, honestly, like, it's not easy to get your parents to drive an hour so you can go look at pictures on tape covers and play music that they don't want to listen to anyways. They're not, my mom wasn't super receptive to the idea of driving an hour so I could go and pick out a record that I might not like, you know? So the underground was a different thing. And nowadays, the metal community is very influenced by the media, the metal blogs and the metal media. And that is, the metal media, for the most part, has the same, a similar thing going on in the metal media that is that goes on in the video game media, that goes on at the New York Times, that goes on at Vox and at Motherboard and Vice. It's a lot of the same people. And if it's not the same people, they're friends, they're buddies. They hang out. They all live in the Brooklyn area or in Jersey, and they hang out and they go to the same bars. And so they have a lot of the same political opinions. So there's not a lot of people in the metal community that actually have thoughts that are outside of what is considered politically correct. You know, it doesn't help that, like, you know, a band like, and I love Rage Against the Machine's music, but like they're all communists.
Right.
And they're clearly, you know, I mean, rolling down Rodeo going shopping, you know, they're millionaire communists talking about revolution. It's like, you know, I'm not buying it, man. I'm just not buying it in your Aston Martin, you know, or in, you know, I feel like I want to say, and this could be just me misremembering stuff, but I feel like Zach De La Rocha quit Rage in the 90s to go to South America and actually be a part of that kind of stuff. Some of the more revolutionary stuff. I don't know if he actually went to go and fight, or what, if he went down there. I could be, you know, I could be making this up and just have the impression because Rage kind of went away for a little while. But and so if that's the case, then kudos to him. But, you know, like there's a lot of people out there that talk about socialism and have very Marxist kind of thought and ideas in their music, and it's not very rebellious,
Right.
as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's kind of what we were talking about with the ACAB people voting for Biden and Harris. There's been, I don't know, it's like the top 1% has co-opted this message that is antithetical to their existence, but it's no threat to them because
the dead Kennedys, or was it the dead Kennedys, or I think it was the dead Kennedys. One of the, you know, back in the old school punk bands, posted something with a picture of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on Twitter. And I'm like, look, I got nothing against Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but an old school punk band posting some shit about the, you know, Supreme Court justice, that is just fucked up. That is just plain fucked up. What are you talking about? You're supposed to be like anti-establishment, and now you're all, you know, boomers that are like pro Biden.
Yeah, so
I agree with that shit.
I don't know if you know who Ryan Dawson is, but I had him on my show about a month ago. And he said something that I'd never thought of, but I think it's actually true. He said, you know, everyone says, oh, the left used to be anti-war and now they're not. He said the left was never anti-war. The left started World War I. They got us into World War II. They started Korea. They started Vietnam. And then after they started Vietnam, it was all these college kids that did not want to go. They didn't want to get drafted. So they were against the war that they would get drafted into. But then even if you look since then, that still remained true. Like the left has only been against wars that Republicans have started. They've never, I mean, this whole, you know, when Tulsi was running, everyone was asking her, your party used to be the party of civil liberties and being against war. And I was like, when were the Democrats ever that? Right. It was only out of opportunistic moments. Do you think that's true as well? Or
yeah, I think that's totally true. I think that because if you go back to, you know, what is historically left leaning again, and I talk about, you know, Marx and stuff, that's all revolutionary. Mm-hmm. And revolutions are not anti-war. Right. They are revolutions are very pro-war. You know, the October Revolution in Russia, that was pretty brutal. The Bolsheviks weren't fucking around. There was no give peace a chance in that shit, man. You know, so I think that's pretty right on. When it comes to the left and or progressives, which I feel like you can have like Republican progressives, definitely, but I think that the left tends to be just as warmongering as, you know, as anyone else, or as the right, I guess is probably the best way to say it. But again, the left and the right nowadays, it's not it's not as clear as it used to be. Like left
Right.
and right are not Democrat and Republican anymore. Like that, or it's not as clearly, if you're on the right, you're a Republican, and if you're on the left, you're a Democrat. I think that it's far more nuanced and mixed up with culture today than it's at least been in my lifetime.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I talk about this a lot. The left right paradigm doesn't really exist anymore. Like there were times this past election when Trump was doing things that were to the left of what Joe Biden wanted to do, you know,
Yep.
but yeah, I mean, it's really, to me, it's authoritarianism versus libertarianism, lowercase L libertarianism. It's really like, how much do you want the government to control, you know? And it's weird because a guy can be looked at as a small government person when he wants a Leviathan border patrol system, and he wants, you know, like the NSA tapping all of our phone calls, and he wants a gigantic military, but he's against Medicare for all, so we call him a small government conservative. It's like, wait a second, like, that doesn't really make much sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense at all. I totally agree. Like there's some people that I'm very, very friendly with from other bands that that have the same kind of quandary about, you know, what is right and left, because like I know there's a lot of libertarians that are, say, pro-life, right? I'm pro-choice up to the end of the second trimester. You know, and I know that for some libertarians that's tough to swallow, and I get it. Like I get it, you know, because you know there is nobody that has less of a voice than an unborn child. And I'm not one of those people that thinks that oh, it's not a baby until something about the birth canal that magically makes a pile of goo turn into a human child as it's coming out. Like that ain't the way that it works. Like that's a baby in there. Like first trimester, I'm gonna be like, all right, that I can say yeah. Second trimester, I'm already squeamish. I'm like, you know, and third trimester, like no, like and I think that I've had to explain to people why, like, you know, the whole shout your abortion thing is really, really, really bad for the idea of if you want abortion to remain legal and safe, and the whole Democrat line from the 90s, safe, legal, and rare. If you want it to be that, you don't want to shout your abortion. You don't want to make, because it's fucking ghoulish.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
it's monstrous. Like you
yeah.
can't sugarcoat killing a baby, and that's why, in my opinion, they lie about it. And you can say, oh, it's not a baby and yada yada, but you have to use semantics, and you have to lie, and they have to you know, say you can't show pictures of what an abortion looks like to people that are going to get abortions, because, and the reason is because if you tell them the truth, they're like, holy fuck, I'm killing a human being.
Right.
That's the way that it is. So I think that I think that abortion should remain legal, but I also don't think that we should go ahead and lie to make people feel comfortable about it.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
just don't.
I kind of feel the same way about gun rights, because obviously I'm just like you. I don't believe in any gun laws, but the way the NRA and so many gun rights Republicans went about the Parkland school shooting was just so dumb. I mean, like posting memes of I think her name was Emma, the girl with the shaved head, like posting memes of her ripping the Constitution up. I'm just like, what are you doing? You're so, I mean, you're our biggest enemy. Like right now, we should be showing empathy in that we have solutions for gun violence, you know, because guns have been removed from society. No one has any connection to them anymore. They're not brought up with a sense of respect for them. You know, like there's so many ways we could talk about this, but going around posting memes of kids who were just in the middle of a school shooting and making fun of them is so dumb. It's just like the abortion thing you're talking about. It's just so obnoxious, and it completely deflates your cause.
Yep, totally. And the there are times when like making fun of David Hogg is acceptable.
Oh, especially now. Like now he's a different being than he was 3 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. Now you can go ahead and lay into him.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, David Hogg in particular, particular was, he wasn't even at school. Like he grabbed
Right.
his camera and ran back because of it. So that kid, I think that kid deserved some criticism. We'll just leave it at that, from day one. But you're right. I agree completely about Emma and the other kids. It's like they're kids and they went through something terrible. Like, have a little empathy. Like, try to understand. Because I made a video after Parkland, and I was just trying to help people understand why just passing a law wasn't the answer, because there are a lot of obstacles. You can't just say pass this law, like, oh, this gun is what they used, outlaw those, problem solved. That ain't how it works.
Right.
And I was very measured, and I was very very calm, and I did my best to understand, or be understanding, and be delicate with what is a delicate situation. And then I talked about the metal press earlier. They decided that they were going to say that I wanted to kill more babies. So I was like, that's the extent of the conversation. I'm a guy that I understand gun laws. That if there is a guy that you want to have guns, so when you hear soccer moms talk about, well, I don't want to get rid of guns, but I want people to be licensed and I want training and da 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 da.
Yeah.
I've got multiple guns that are licensed through the federal government because they're NFA items. So I've got my fingerprints and my passport photos on file with the ATF multiple times. I go to train every single year, at least one time, usually more times. I went to 4 different classes last year. I was in the service. I've had background checks. I don't drink. I don't do drugs, any of it. So I'm the guy you ostensibly want to have guns. If you're being honest and you want someone that's trained or that's trained and knows about gun safety and knows how to use guns and blah, 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 I'm that guy. So when I made that video, I was trying to help people understand why why gun laws aren't as simple as just, pass a law. And it was really disheartening that the metal press used it as clickbait to go ahead and not only make dumb remarks, because it was it was dumb. They didn't understand, and they were all upset about the whole thing, and so they got mad and they were saying stupid shit because they're stupid people. But at the same time, it was like, how are we supposed to help people understand if all you're going to do is get mad and be dumb? So I feel you about the way the NRA behaves. I was like, I think I had an NRA membership for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
I think and it might have been after Sandy Hook happened. I think I joined the NRA because I was like, well, this is going to be really rough, so I might as well give them some money to help defend people's rights for a little bit. But they've been, the only thing that they've ever done is kind of like soften the blow about which gun laws are going to be passed.
Yeah, and they've also fed into the culture war so much instead of just being about gun laws and the Constitution. I mean, Dana Loesch, or however you say her last name, I remember she did an ad in 2019, and there was nothing in it about guns. It was just about how evil the left was and how they want to destroy our way of life. And I'm like, what does this have to do with the Second Amendment? It seems like their goal is to just fundraise and make money off of crises and get Republicans elected. Outside of that, I haven't really seen a stellar case for joining them, and seeing them tank has actually been I've kind of enjoyed it. I got to be honest.
The only thing that bothers me about the situation with the NRA tanking is not that the NRA is tanking. It's that people that are anti-gun think that the NRA is like the be all end all of pro gun. And man, are they fucking wrong. Right. They are so incredibly wrong. The NRA is not very good when it comes to the Second Amendment. They've allowed a whole bunch of stuff to pass. They only take up cases that they're sure they can win. They don't try to peel back any any legislation, they should be going after the ATF every single chance they get, because the ATF is entirely unconstitutional. The NFA is entirely unconstitutional. They should be doing everything they can to attack that law and that organ and that bureaucracy as much as possible. Because the way the left wins is they're constantly picking, right? The way that people that want to see gun laws that are far more strict than we have, is they're constantly picking a little bit, take a little bit here, take a little bit there. And eventually, if you don't push back, and I'm not talking about resist the current law they're trying to push, but actually gain ground, right? Like roll back actual laws on the books, that are either on the state or federal level. Unless you do that, you eventually will lose your rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so to take it away from the gun argument, the fact that there are civil asset forfeiture laws means that it becomes more likely that the federal government or federal agents or state agents can enter your house to take your shit for another reason. And it's because the civil asset forfeiture laws have been allowed to stand. If you had judges and a population that didn't put up with it, that just said, hell no, that is blatantly a violation of the Fourth Amendment, then you wouldn't have red flag laws being discussed, because it would be clear that entering someone's home and taking their shit without a warrant is not acceptable. But as soon as and this is an argument I make to people all the time, the reason you should support the Second Amendment isn't because you like guns. It's because you like the First Amendment and you like the Fourth Amendment. Because if you allow any of the amendments to be weakened, you allow all of the amendments to be weakened. If you allow the Bill of Rights to be weakened in any way, then you allow the whole bill, not just one amendment, because it shows, I mean, people may or may not know, but one of the arguments against a Bill of Rights in the first place, the people that were like, we don't need to get a Bill of Rights, we don't need to have that. The argument was, if we make a Bill of Rights, it implies that the federal government will have powers that are not expressly delegated to them in Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution tells you what the feds can do. That's it. That's what you can do, federal government. By putting a Bill of Rights in there, it implies that there might be other things that aren't specifically laid out in Article 1, Section 8 that the feds can do.
Right.
And maybe that isn't the best argument, but it's worth thinking about. Yeah. It's worth knowing that the reason that the Bill of Rights, the reason that people might not have wanted the Bill of Rights is because it implies there's other things they can do. And so that when you extend that thought process to the Bill of Rights, if you allow there to be small infractions, small infringements, to use the wording of the Second Amendment, then of one of the amendments in the Bill of Rights, then you're going to imply that there might be ways to get around other amendments in the Bill of Rights, you know? So
yeah, I totally agree. It is always annoying to me how much people seem to only know like one or two amendments, and that's all they care about. And then someone can claim to be like a constitutional conservative or something because they support two of the amendments, and then the rest are just completely off the table. Whereas you just said, once you start ignoring one, it's useless. I forget, I always butcher this quote and I forget who said it, but somebody said the Constitution either enabled this government or was unable to.
Like Sanders Spooner.
Yeah, that's right. And so therefore,
like Sanders Spooner.
Therefore it's an irrelevant document, something along those lines. It's totally true. That's what we've got.
Yeah, it either the Constitution has allowed for this government or it was unable to stop it. Therefore, either way, it's unfit to exist. Right. And there, that's just, I mean, it's not a bad argument, honestly. You know, and this is something that I talk to people about as frequently as I can. And Michael Malice makes the point a lot too. The Constitution is just a piece of paper with ideas written down on it. Mm-hmm. And if people do not, if the population doesn't demand that those amendments be held to the letter, then it's just a piece of paper.
Yeah.
If you don't, if the population our biggest record is called The Fall of Ideals. And I wrote that in 2006. And that's what I was talking about. Like the ideals that our country is founded on seem to me to be becoming unimportant to the population. And there's people that'll say it's consumerism and stuff. And there's probably an argument for that. And I get it. But if the population doesn't look at the ideals of self-ownership and understand what it means to be free, which is you don't have to ask permission.
Right.
Like if you're free, you don't need permission. You just do. You go out and you live your life however you want to. That's what free people do. They don't say, may I go do this? They just go do it.
Right.
You know? And if those ideals aren't important to the population, you cannot expect to remain free, because it's clearly obvious that governments want nothing more than to be able to control their population, and different governments want different levels of control. But if left unattended, then you will lose your freedom. You will lose your liberty to live your life how you want. And it will be because the government will just take your rights.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about this with Dan, Taxation is Theft Berman. I've had him on my show before. The government is only as good or as bad as the people let it be. And our people just don't care. I mean, I've said so many times, a stupid population is very easy to subjugate. You know, there's no historical or economic or civics literacy left in this country. And it seems kind of by design. You know, it seems that we've been sucked into this entertainment, instant gratification, acceptance society. And that allows us to just go with whatever the status quo is, go with whatever the government wants to do. There's no rebellion anymore. There's no demanding that things are held in check or that the government does what we want it to do. It's just become part of just part of the mess. And it seems like it's intentional. I don't know if the people who are in the media and people who make movies and I don't know if they're all in some sort of cahoots, but there does seem to be a consistent theme here of moving people toward being dumber and more accepting and less critical of anything that happens anymore.
Well, I think you're on to something with that thought process. I've heard it described as, as far as I can tell, it's the ideology. It's not that there's like some big cabal of people that get together to say, hey, we're going to do this, right? Or we're going to control. But it's just that people share an ideology. And if the people that are, whatever you call it, the powers that be, the people that are in government, the people that are in the bureaucracies share the same ideology or a similar ideology, you're going to see society move in that direction. And it doesn't take, one guy pulling the strings like the crazy Nazi people. They're like, oh, it's the Jews. And it's like, no, it's not. It's just people that it doesn't matter what their race or religion or whatever it is. It's just people that share their ideologies. And I think it moves in that direction because it sounds nice. Like if you listen to Imagine, that song, right? Imagine all the people, blah, blah, blah. That is totally, it's 13 hours. Sorry about that. It is talking about a communist utopia. Mm-hmm. Imagine no countries. It's just all people living, blah, blah, blah. That's literally describing a communist utopia, but it's describing a utopia. And it sounds nice, right? Like no war, nobody, people aren't fighting over stuff. Everybody has what they need and blah, blah, blah. It sounds nice. It's also entirely unrealistic. Mm-hmm. It is an entirely imagine it because it's imaginary. We are well real. Yeah, it is very well. It's definitely well named. We are real people living in a real world and we have real needs, and we are limited by the fact that we are just human beings. We do not have the ability to just want something and have it materialize in front of us. It can be, I mean, you can create things, but that's different than just wanting and having it appear like a Star Trek replicator. Like, we live in a society, we live in a reality, not just a society, but a reality that is limiting, and there is scarcity. And that's one of the things that I loved about Tom Woods is he mixes a lot of economics into his talks, into what he's talking about when it comes to the way society works and stuff. And if we had a post-scarcity society, then we could have like a communist utopia, and everybody would just have the things they need and blah, blah, blah. But now we don't live in that reality. And the best way that we can come up with to manage the reality that we have has been a society that has a division of labor where people can do what they want and help to provide needs for other people in the society, and do it at a profit, because profit is a motivating factor. People like to call capitalism a system, and I push back against that, because I don't think capitalism is a system. I think capitalism is a result. If you have a free society that has property rights, you invariably will end up with markets and a capitalist and a capitalist system. And the only way to prevent that is to use force, use government authority. So when you're arguing, if I get on Twitter and I'm arguing with Marxists or communists or whatever, they like to say, oh, it's a capitalist system and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, it's not a capitalist system. It's a system where people are free. And if you're arguing against a capitalist system, then you're arguing against people being free to live their lives the way they want.
Yeah. So you're an atheist, is that correct? Or
I am.
Yeah, I am too. And, my argument for decentralization and capitalism and small government is actually because I think people inherently kind of suck. And,
Fair.
Some people think we need a big government because people suck. To me, you're just centralizing the suckiness to fewer decisions, fewer disparities. Like, if we all suck and we're all competing against each other and we all have less power, to me, that's a safer system. But I've heard you in your interviews, you say that you actually think people are good, or that they're like, that society can work because people are, they tend to be better than they do worse. Do you just want to explain why you think that and how you square that?
I think that most people are generally inherently good. If you see the way that people react to violence, people avoid violence. I've heard Michael Malice make the argument that violence is expensive, and I think that there's truth to that. But people don't want to see other people hurt. They're shocked and horrified when they see other people hurt, unless there is a context where they think that person deserves it. So if you have a situation where there's someone being an asshole at the bar, just screwing with people and blah, 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 and then someone stands up and pops him in the face, everyone's like, yeah, that guy was an asshole, right? Like, that's cool. But if the dude was kind of being an asshole and then someone got up and pulled out a hatchet and split his skull open, people would, whoa, people would flip out, and rightly so, because it's brutal, because it's the punishment isn't justified considering what was going on. Same thing if you get up and shoot someone because the dude's being a dick. It's like, you probably shouldn't do that. And I think that when people are living, we're tribal creatures at our core. But I think that because we're human beings, we look at human beings as humans. And the only way you can make treating humans badly is if you make them not human. right? You dehumanize them. That's why it's bad news when you hear people talking about a group of people as vermin or scum, all those people, them. It's the othering that causes the problem. As long as you think of them as individual people and humans, we can't help but have empathy for them because they're humans. They are us. It's when they are otherized, whether it be by governments or by skin color, tribalisms, those kind of ugly things. It detaches people from their humanity. But if you conceptualize people as individuals first, then it's hard not to have empathy. Like the way that Daryl Davis takes care of racists, right? Like he goes and he has met a bunch of dudes that were in the KKK and he has turned them away from the KKK because he sits down with them and he talks to them like they're people, and they realize that guy's a person. And if that guy with the different skin color from me is a person, that means other people with different skin color from me are people. I was thinking the wrong thing. They're not all bad. And so then Daryl Davis takes their robes and he's got his, racist scalps. He collects robes. I think that's the coolest thing in the world. It's like you're killing racists by making them not racist. Because if you kill a racist, if you kill a person because they're racist or they're the other, the only thing you do is make their family think, oh, he was right.
Yeah.
So I think that people are inherent. As long as people look at other people as people, and we can remember and think about our humanity and our individualism, then I think that people are inherently good. And I think it takes outside forces to otherize people, especially in the US, where, in a historical context, life is easy in the United States, even for people that are unemployed and people that are having a hard time. It is a much easier life in the US today than, anywhere in the world 100 years ago or 200 years ago. So there's not as much reason to struggle over resources today as there was 100 or 200 years ago. There's not as much reason to fight. There's far more opportunity to better your position. So I feel like as long as we remember our common humanity and remember that we're individuals, that we are not members of groups, that the group that you may be a part of, the groups that you could be a part of are actually infinite. It's like people that are the same height as me. And then everybody that's taller than me is a different group or whatever. It's like you can break up people into different groups and in an infinite number of ways. So if we remember we're individuals first, then people are inherently good first. That doesn't mean they're smart. Like when you say suck, that might be just because they're stupid. That's fair.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think it's the only way that we survive, not even as a country, but just as a group of people on this spot of land, regardless of, is decentralizing and looking at each other as individuals, because the compartmentalization that you're talking about is what is driving us apart right now. And it's so stupid. Because I might have I don't ask my coworkers what their politics are. I don't know, like the guy who drives the other, truck number 5 or whatever, he might be a communist. I don't know, or he might be a MAGA guy, and I don't know. And I treat him with respect as an individual. It's once we start finding out what each other think that we start building up these walls that shouldn't be there and start dehumanizing each other. And we replace the human aspect with whatever ideology we're ascribing to them, right? And so, that's really what it is it's not just lack of individual thinking, it's literally dehumanization. You're taking the humanity away from them and painting them with some disgusting ideology that you disagree with.
We got to be careful. This is exactly what Gina got canceled for.
It's true.
Do you know? That thing that she was saying that's what she was saying. I'm not going to get any further than that because I don't want to go ahead and make comparisons or anything. But that's what she was saying. Don't dehumanize people. If you dehumanize people, I see it. That's part of why I'm in Texas. It's like I see it from people in the government talking about people that are liberty minded and or talking about like the way MAGA people are, you know, some people that are very pro government or like if you got like resist or blue wave in your Twitter bio with your pronouns, you're probably not going to be treating MAGA people like they're people. You're probably going to call them maggots or something. And
Right.
you know, and the same thing goes for libtards or whatever that you know the right does and stuff. But we really need to stop doing that as a group, you know, as a society. We have to say, look, this kind of behavior isn't good for us. It's bad for us. It's bad for us. Like high fructose corn syrup is bad for us. It's just terrible, you know?
Yeah. So I kind of agree with you on the doomer aspect, I'm a little bit black pilled. I have very little hope, but I am obviously fully invested in the Libertarian Party. And even for people who don't join the party, I'm invested in the movement, just trying to get people to think this way. And, you know, I think Dave gave us a little hope on the podcast we did the other night. He's like, you know, look, abolitionists 20 years before slavery was abolished, you know, they thought there was no hope. Same thing for suffragists, for women's right to vote. Like they didn't know right before it happened that they were as close as they were. But I'm still pretty skeptical. So to me, being involved in this movement, trying to get people to care about individualism and liberty and property rights and taking care of each other, I feel like we're headed toward, I usually put it this way. I feel like we've already gone off a cliff and we're just figuring out how to soften the impact. And in my mind, softening the impact is having a strong movement that already exists that embraces these ideas. So with whatever disaster we hit, whether there's some sort of revolution or some sort of civil war or the government just crumbles and falls apart, whatever happens, we've built something that we can unite around. Whereas if we don't do that now, it's going to be too late and we're going to end up with, you know, we're going to look like Syria, or it's going to be like the French Revolution where we get rid of what's in there, but we have no plan for what comes afterward, and we just end up with some autocrat. So what are your thoughts? Why are you, even though you're pessimistic about the future, why are you involved in the Libertarian Party and the Liberty movement? What's your hope to get out of it?
I can't help it. I think like I've never been good at being fake.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if I was good at being fake, I would have spent the past decade faking what I believed in and probably, you know, be a multimillionaire. Cause, you know, I think that All That Remains would probably be a bigger band if I didn't have the politics that I have. You know, and that's, you know, maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. I don't know, but I'm not good at putting on an act. Like this is me. I mean, as much as I'm a rock star, I'm sitting here in a hoodie and a hat. You know, it's not, I'm not like, I don't have boots and earrings and big, you know, hairdo or what, like, I'm just not that guy. You know, I'm very much a normal dude who's got a really cool job. So when I say I can't help it, I mean, it's just part of who I am. And it's what I believe, you know, like, I really believe in the founding principles, or the principles that the founders believed in, you know, and you know, I'm aware that they were imperfect and that the times were imperfect, but when you extend the ideas in the Declaration of Independence to all people, you end up with a society that is better than a society where with top-down control.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that, and it was a new idea back then, but the idea that all people are created equal and that from their humanity come rights that pre-exist government, and that the only just government is one that exists to protect the rights of the people, and that a just government gets its power from the consent of the people, and that without the consent of the people, the government is illegitimate. And that if that government takes powers that the people have not granted it, then it's the right of the people to abolish that government and to create a new government. Those things are real to me. Like that stuff is like, it's real. It's important. And I wish more people thought about it. And I know that I'm in a small minority of people that actually think about those ideas. And because I think it's important. It's very important, at least for the United States, for people to really internalize that. And I'm a big proponent of getting rid of the Department of Education. I'm a big proponent of local schools and local control of schools and charter schools and private schools and anything to take the federal government out of it, anything to take the centralization out. And I think that we should be teaching students and children that the ideas in the Declaration of Independence are why we exist as a country, and that they were new, like they were an innovation at the time, like, and we set the standard for the rest of the whole world. Like the US is, 250-ish years old or whatever. But for 200 and whatever years, 240 some years, we have set the standard, and we've been the country that other countries have written their constitutions and designed their governments after, because it not only works, it really does provide people with the best opportunity to control their own life. And if you have people that control their own life, that makes for a happier population. It doesn't make for a population that never has problems, but it makes for people, it makes for a people that feel like they are empowered. And a people that feel like they're empowered are a far happier population than a population that feels like they're under control from someone else, even if that someone else is providing them with healthcare and money and food and blah 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 blah. People want to feel like they have control over their lives, and I think that that's something that you see all over the world. I mean, that's what started the Arab Spring. The guy poured gasoline over himself and lit himself on fire because he didn't feel like he had any control over his life. He had to pay, he had to pay bribes just to be able to have his cart, and he didn't have the money to pay the bribe to open his cart. He felt like he had nothing left to lose. He felt like he had no control. So he doused himself in gasoline and self-immolated, because he didn't feel like he was free. He felt like he was under control, and he couldn't, he couldn't better his life. Give people the ability to work to better their lives, and you end up with a happier population.
Yeah, well, we should, I think I found the promo clip for this video. We'll have to cut out the little loss of audio there, but that was, man, you hit the nail on the head there, man. We need more celebritarians. We need more people who are in the public eye, who, are actors or singers or whatever, preaching these ideas. And you do. I watched some of your interviews before we did this, and when you're being asked about your band or whatever, you put those principles out there, and I'm super glad we have you, and hopefully you can, influence other people to join, because we need to, as we were talking earlier, the media and just the general narrative is pushing us to be more stupid and more dependent. So if we can have people in that system fighting back against it to talk about the ideas that you're talking about, I think that pushes us in a better direction.
Absolutely. I agree. I think that I've been lucky in that I've been able to reach out to people through music and stuff like that. And I know there's a ton of people that come to me and they're like, dude, if it wasn't for you, I'd have never found out who Ron Paul was. And Ron Paul showed me blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's like, for me, that's, you know, that's right up there with some of the best things that's ever happened in my life, you know? So I'm lucky. And I appreciate you bringing me on so that way I can run my face a little bit.
Yeah, well, we'll have to do this again, man. I don't think this is a one-time deal. We'll
Awesome.
we'll do it again. I'll just give you the last word so you can tell people where to follow you. I know social media is throttling everyone. You're kind of moving over to Patreon. I've seen you post a lot of stuff on Twitter there. So just tell everyone where they can see your stuff and how they can support you.
I'm Phil That Remains. If there's a platform that you're on and you want to see if I'm on it, search for Phil That Remains. I'm definitely on Twitter all the time, and that's where I'm very political. I stream on Twitch on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And that's not political there. I just sing All That Remains songs and stuff. It'd be cool if you want to join my Patreon page. It's $3 a month just for that. And I do like your the stuff that you see on Instagram and the stuff that you like, the whole story thing and the posting of videos and stuff like that on my Patreon page, because I don't want to give Mark Zuckerberg any money. Fuck him. But yeah, Phil That Remains. If you're wondering if I'm there, search for Phil That Remains. And the band is All That Remains. You can find us at allthatremainsonline.com.
All right, awesome. We will do it again, Phil. Thanks for coming on.
Awesome, definitely.